All right, second video. This is the rear end of the car. When I left off yesterday, we had built the front end on the car and steering rack, suspension, and tonight, a little late, but better late than never. We're gonna build the rear end, and I tried to prepare a little bit so the video could go a little faster. Room kind of looks like there's a tornado that went through it, but I think I got everything set to where I can be a pretty efficient video. Hey, Colin. So I took some of the car apart. So this is what's left of the 5.0 Elite kit, and besides the servo, I think everything else I'm not going to use. A chassis, servo mount, these electronics. So this is what's left over. And the parts I am going to use, we're going to start out with the gearbox. So we'll set this aside. And I kind of went through this a little bit to be efficient in the video. Checked everything out. Everything looked good when I pulled it apart. I didn't build this car, so wasn't sure what to expect, but everything looks good. And this is a ball diff, stock TLR ball diff. And the part that I changed out of this gearbox is this gear. It's a metal idler gear, and I'll show you the, if I got the part number here. This one, yeah, this is it. So you want to get this idler, well, my writing's backwards, but it's part number TLR 332070, aluminum idler gear and shaft. So the stock aluminum idler won't take it, or the stock plastic idler won't take it. So we put it in an aluminum one. The stock top shaft is in there. You can see them, so I can change the light a little bit where we can get a better light. So just for these purposes, so you can see, we have the stock, and that's kind of bad here. I don't know how to get any better light, but I'll do the best I can here. Okay, so stock idler, stock top shaft, that's aluminum, stock slipper, and I'm going to put in the aluminum idler. These are all stock bearings too. Currently I'm running all stock bearings in my car. So idler goes in and stock diff goes in. And one of the things I do with the gearbox before I close it up is normally it's metal on plastic. You have metal, plastic, but now we have metal, plastic. So metal on metal usually wears pretty fast. It's not normally a good idea without any lube. So I ended up grenading one of these gearboxes a while ago, and I use this lube now. It's actually by RC Bombshells, and there's a lot of good ones out there. I think the Tyler might have some, the Z Lime stuff, and but I just take and run the diff in some lube to coat all of the gears, but mainly just to make sure that there's some lubricant on the metal to metal gear. It'll chew through them pretty quick if you don't. So I put about that much on there. It's not a lot. I'll put it in here and run it around. I've taken gearboxes apart before that, and they're fully packed with grease, and I don't think that's real necessary. You don't gain a whole lot. I just want a good coat of grease on all the gears, and this stuff kind of disappears in the gearbox once you run it a few times. So you can see it kind of strings on there right now, and it'll get a good coating on there, and that's all I do on the internals. Then I'm going to take and close this up. Make sure everything spins real free. You'll have a little bit of a gummy feel at first, but that gearbox will run real free. And I have broken one of these, but doing stupid things I broke one. So they're very, very strong gearbox. Let me put this together. Let's see if I can find the screws here. So I'm using all the stock screws to put this together. It's got a little gear cover I'll put on. This on. This is all kit stock stuff. So it's like a spur gear cover. I normally, the gear ratio I'm running right now, I'm running a 3.0 Phantom, and I'm running 1881. So the 81 barely fits. This might be a 78 right now, but I'll change this out to an 81. Other thing I'll note is I won't do it tonight, but this is the 5.0 slipper, I believe, on here. I think the 4.0 slipper has bigger pads and a different spur. So I'm experimenting with a couple different slippers. I know there's a Avid Triad and a couple of 3-disc type slippers. There's a B5 style that works really good. But I'm running just the stock 4.0 slipper currently, 2-pad. And you have to run it really tight, but it seems to work pretty good. The 5.0, they made the slipper pad and the disc a little bit smaller, and I'm not sure if it can handle the power that you can put through them. So in my opinion, 4.0 is the 4.0 slipper is the best. And it all fits on the, actually, let me see something here. One thing I would note though is the 5.0, this has the smaller shaft. So there's a couple different configurations. You want the big 5.0 top shaft that has the big screw in it for the tensioner. But the 4.0 slipper is the best situation with the bigger pads. So they upgraded the screw and shaft coming out of the top shaft to a bigger shaft, because when you tighten it down a lot, it can bend it. So end result, 5.0 top shaft with the big end on it and screw, and the 4.0 pads, spur, and discs, and that's what I run. It's the best. There's a lot of combinations that'll run, but that's what I'm running right now. It seems like the best combination for stock parts. I don't know, I made that more confusing than it needed to be, I think. Okay, so let me just screw this together. Let's see here. Get the wrong size screw in here. Okay, so just a couple bolts that hold the gearbox together. Put those in. Okay, so now we have gearbox ready to go, real strong, standard outdrive, not any spec racer stuff. That's ready to go in the car. So, put this away. Next thing is the suspension arms. So I did these before the video, but what you're gonna do is take and flip the arms. Normally the arms are this configuration if the nose of the car's down. I'm gonna take and flip them where they're this configuration, and I'll show you why once it goes together. It actually sweeps the arm back a little bit, gives you a little bit more wheelbase. Even though we got an adjustable front end, kind of the cool thing it does is when you sweep the arms back, it moves the motor forward in comparison to the tire. So what we're trying to do is get the motor as far forward as possible with the 3.0 lay down tranny, or the 3-gear lay down tranny, and sweeping the arms back. The position of the tires and the motor in reference to the tires is as far forward as possible. So you just flip the arms around. And we're going to flip kind of the whole rear suspension around, because in off-road normally they run shocks forward. In drag racing we're going to run our shocks back. So the other thing that I did on these arms is I'm running the rear hub. When I flip these around, this way is the back of the car. This is where the shock mounts. The hub is all the way spaced back. So we're getting the longest car we can with the hub back and the arms swept back. So it'll be easier to see when I get it together. You can see the dog bone angle is back and the whole thing is back. So, okay, let's put this stuff on the car. I know there's been some requests for the 4-gear and the 3-gear stand-up, and currently the chassis only has the holes, the waterfall holes drilled for the laydown. I've gone the fastest with the laydown. I've run the stand-up. I've run the 4-gear. 4-gear is actually a pretty good option. I think in the future chassis, we're probably going to add the waterfall holes, but I've really been stuck on the 3-gear laydown. I'd highly recommend that. Moving the motor forward is a good thing, getting weight forward, especially as traction comes up. So it's drilled for the 3-gear laydown now. If you want to run the like the 4-gear, it's very easy to locate the holes. I would just bolt the chassis together. I would just bolt the chassis together, and you'll be able to see the bolt pattern in the like this right here. So right now we're running on the laydown waterfall holes. These holes aren't in the chassis currently, but if you bolt the chassis to this, you'll have a pattern to generate these holes if you really want to run the 4-gear. Future chassis too, we can add those holes. Not a big deal. I don't run that way, so there has been some requests. Okay, so goal here is we're going to put, and this isn't easy to do. Hopefully I can get this done. Okay, so I want to put spacers under the gearbox. These are pretty critical. You don't want to just bolt the gearbox straight onto the chassis because it doesn't sit flat. So I've measured the bottom surface of the gearbox with the C&D block, and I'm going to run I made this kind of diagram. I'm going to run a let's see here. The difference between the two is 1.5 millimeters. You got to run, I don't know how to explain this real good. I tried to glue these on too, because trying to put these on, I mean, I didn't want to make a 3-hour video of you guys trying to watch me put these spacers on, but it's kind of, this is the most difficult part of the build. This is the C&D block, and these are 2.5-inch spacers. These are going to go down, right? So these are going to go this way in the car. On the back, there's going to be 4-millimeter spacers. That will sit this C&D block level on a flat chassis. And the bolts go all the way through the spacers, the block, and they bolt into the gearbox. I don't run the 5th and 6th screw in the middle because I don't want to flex the chassis, or I don't want to flex the gearbox. I'm grabbing onto the gearbox at the ends with the 4 bolts. And if there is a spacer that's a little off or something doesn't sit, I don't want to flex the gearbox because I've blown out the gearbox flexing that and flexing it before. So I just mount with the outer 4 screws. So I'll attempt this. This is usually the hardest part of the deal here. So let's see. I was sitting here trying to glue them on before the video, because this would turn out to be a 3-hour video real easy trying to get these in there. Okay, so I'm going to put the front in first. Make sure I got the right length screws too. So I'm going to snug these down, and I need to put the suspension arms on before I snug the rear ones down. I need my motor out of the deal. How is it? There we go. Slightly long. Okay, so we have the front mounted. Now we got to put the suspension arms on, and the pills. That's another good thing to. So this is part of the setup, but in the front, I'm running the pills as far. There's just, at least on this Elite kit, it's got square pills. So I'm running the pills where the hole is as high and as outbound, so as wide in the front as possible. And I'm running the back pills where, let's see here. Did I get that right? No. Sorry. Scratch that. The end goal is I want as little toe in and as little anti-squat as possible. At least for right now, I've run a lot of anti-squat in the past, but I'm running a wheelie bar that I want to plant on the ground. So I'm trying to get the car to plant a little bit and running next to no anti-squat. So in the front, I am, make sure this is right. I'm low and wide in the front, and in the back, I'm high and narrow. So I'm taking the back and I'm squeezing it in as much as I can. So it centers, or it moves the arm to where there's the least amount of toe in. And then I'm taking it this way, and normally anti-squat is when the arms lean like this. So I'm leveling the arm as much as possible. And then actually it's almost, I think it's about zero when you run them completely low in the front and completely high in the back. So no anti-squat and as little toe in as possible. Okay, so there is these little tiny shims that they give you to make the arm as snug as possible. So when you assemble the rear, I'll put the arm on, and then I'll put this little tiny shim on the back of it. Do the same to the other side. This is a feature of the 5.0 Elite kit too, these square pills, which this is the first time I've dealt with them is my car and this car, and I'm actually really liking them. They're a little bit more adjustable than the standard 4.0 stuff. Okay, so we've swapped the arms. These arms normally were on this arm was on this side and this arm was on this side, so I've swapped the arms, and the shock mounts are back, and I have the, let's make sure I got those on here. I got these little shims on the back to make sure there's not a lot of movement in the arm, and you try to get all the joints very free, but as little slop as possible. You want to keep everything tight but not bound up. Okay, so this goes this way. Okay, so now I need to put spacers in the back. So I'm running 2.5 millimeter in the front. I'm going to put 4 millimeter in the back, and you have to slide these little suckers in here and bolt them on. So the bolt's going to go through the chassis, through the spacer, into the C block, and then into the gearbox. So you can kind of see why it's difficult. One of the main problems is I think, let's see here, I may have used okay, I gotta change something real quick. I use the longer screw in the front. I gotta use the longer screw in the back. That's what happens when you take things apart. A couple hours ago, don't keep track of it. Okay, so let me just swap these screws out real quick. Hopefully this doesn't turn into a disaster. That's not good. That screw. It's gonna turn into a treasure hunt here real soon. just need, those are the two that are gonna go in the back. Okay, we're all set now. Sometimes too in this back bolts here, some of these wheelie bars that you'll run, these aftermarket bars bolt on here, so you may need to go get some longer screws. If a plate bolts on here, these screws start getting pretty short, and it has to be very strong. So, okay, so let's try this again. Okay, I got the two spacers. So what I'm trying to do to kind of show you is there's a space between the chassis and the C block. I'm putting the spacer between those two. So between the chassis and the C block, the gearbox bolts directly on. You can kind of, if you get the front tight enough, this fits in pretty snug and it won't fall out. But trying to put all four of them in at the same time, front and back, starts becoming extremely difficult, especially if you're using multiple spacers. It gets to be a fun project. Okay, wasn't too bad. Oop. Let's get the other one lined up. Oh. My room is starting to look like a tornado has gone through it with all the different builds. Okay. This is the fun part. I was dreading this part on video because normally it takes me about 3 hours to get all these freaking spacers in here, and we're talking about possibly making a shim, like a one-piece thing that fits under this to make this situation a little bit better. There we go. That's not too bad because it can be difficult to get all the shims in. So one thing about the shims is it's not. The total length isn't super critical. You can put, as long as there's a 1.5 millimeter difference between the front to the back, with the back being a little longer, it's just going to lower the chassis because you're not separating the C and D block from the gearbox. You're not raising the diff theoretically because you're raising the C and D block with it. So it's critical to try and get the gearbox flat, but if you're a 0.5 millimeter or 1 millimeter higher, you got a little bit bigger space under the gearbox, it's not a critical thing. So this should give me a 0.5 millimeter under the gearbox when I'm done. Okay. I think we're good to go. It's on. So the other spacer you're going to need is the Waterfall Spacer. Not a super critical item, but usually the Waterfall Spacer is the same size as the front spacers. So once you get everything on there, you can kind of measure the distance. I'm pretty confident it's the same distance spacer size in the front of this as that goes in the Waterfall, because you're gonna have a little bit of a gap there, right? The whole thing is raised up. So don't forget to put those in. That's adds a little structure to the chassis. Okay. Waterfall, or I'm sorry, shock tower. So normally with off-road, shock towers. It goes on like this, shocks forward. We're gonna put shocks backwards, so you flip the tower around. Bolts on the top of the gearbox with let's see here. You can put a sway bar here too, but I don't, I've had really good luck without sway bars. I know there's a lot of people that run sway bars and it can add some stability, but I currently run no sway bars. But they do make kind of a cool sway bar that fits on the front right here that you can try out. Okay, so I have the shocks and the sway bar on. The next video I'm going to go over the shock lengths and the setup and stuff. So for tonight, I'm just going to bolt these on as they were in the off-road. The off-road car. These bolted on. I wanted to show you too. I have, so these hubs are kind of cool. These are the now it's a little bit difficult to see, but these are the Elite hubs that have a bigger bearing on the inside. I think they're a little bit better design. I think they're, I can't remember if they're called HRC or, oh, you're already on the Spacers. Very cool, Nick. Yeah, if you can come up with a better solution for how to space the gearbox up, I've always just used spacers. That's the hardest part of this build. It's kind of a pain in the butt. So to make a plate on the bottom, we were kind of looking at doing that. But I'm excited to see what people come up with after they build this, because these are just my ideas. You get 20 or 30 of these out there, and people are going to come up with some great ideas. So looking forward to that. So we are making, this is a hub that follows the same design as this hub. The difference is it has the big bearing in the back. It has the big, the same bearing size as the Elite, but kind of the cool thing is the pill starts where this one stops. So, I should mention that I'm running this pill as high as I can, so the axle height is as high as possible. On the 4.0s, it's like a +3. I think it might be 3.5 on the Elites, I'm not sure, but I'm raising the hub as high as I can. And in the gearbox, I'm also raising the diff as high as I can. So there's pills in the gearbox that you can flip around. So the diff is high. That's an important one I should have showed you when the gearbox was apart. Diff is high, and outer hub is high. And then what me and my brother were talking about was, we were seeing some of these kits, these aero kits, and other ones that have really tall hubs. So we came up with this. This starts at 4mm and goes to 7, I believe, on the offset. So it's like a +4 to +7. So it continues on where the stock one stops and really raises the axle. But I haven't tested enough to know if it's a benefit. You start losing a little traction and you start gaining forward momentum the higher you get, or the longer you get away, the further away you get from the arm. It seems, this is my theory, people might disagree, but this is just what I've seen. So unless I can raise the gearbox up an equivalent amount and get everything flat where the axle's really high, I don't think I'm doing a good test. So I'm not convinced these are any better yet, but we talked about making these in brass, and we talked about making a spacer to really raise the diff and keep the C&D block low. So it's improvements that we're working on, but to keep this as simple as possible, we're using all the stock parts and the car's really moving out. So I'm not sure if this is necessary yet or not, but this could be in the future. if I can find a benefit or an advantage to doing something like this. So we have this, we're just not putting it out yet to see if it's, I don't want to put out a part that's not, that doesn't work the way I hope it would work. So there's a lot of parts that look super cool out there, and some cars that look amazing, but function is different than form. Sometimes they look cool, but it doesn't work really well. So possibly in the future. Okay, so we got shock tower, back to this thing here. We got shock tower on, shocks are on, that's bolted down. Okay, so we have the shocks on. We're gonna put, so this is the Elite camber spacer thing here. I run the same geometry as the off-road setups, so I believe there's a, looks like there's a 1 millimeter spacer on the inside. There should be a 2 millimeter spacer on the outside, and this goes down, this is moving the, let's see here. I might need to check this. I'll go over this in the setup, but there's adjustments here. This one's high right now, so I need to go, tomorrow when I talk about the setup, I'll verify what all my ball stud spacers are and what this position is, because this whole rack can move up and down like 2 millimeters, 2 or 3, so I'll see what I got going. I'll give you guys my exact setup on my car I'm currently running tomorrow. If there's even if you're not running these cars, if there's one thing to watch, tomorrow I'm going to go over the setup, and I think the setup applies to any car, or at least some of it will, so tomorrow will be a good one. Okay, so we got the camber rack mount on there. We'll snap the ball studs on. Do it on the other side. Okay, so that's what the end result looks like in the back. The only thing I'm missing is the spacers under the waterfall, which I'll add later. You can see too, I talked about the arms sweeping back a little bit. It might be hard to see, but you can see the dog bones here because we reverse the arms. The whole thing moves back. I think it's as much as 4 millimeter. I want to say it's 4 millimeter. I measured it a while ago. But we're moving the axles and the whole thing back as far as we can, which kind of in theory moves everything forward, and acts like everything moves forward. So we're trying to get the motor as far forward in reference to the tire, so you can see when you flip the arms kind of what that does. The other thing I'll show you, just note here, is the shocks are too long. There's really no spacers in the shocks, but the droop is, I run it where it hits the chassis. The droop is pretty close to where you want it. I've limited it a little bit more depending on what wheelie bar I'm running and the setup I'm running, to where it just comes off the chassis a little bit. But if you didn't want to limit the shock at all in the back, it's really close to what you need. So tomorrow I'll do the body mounts, show you how I mount the body. We'll do the electronics, mount the servo, and go over the setups and the shock build. And I can also show you tomorrow some of the different wheelie bar options. I haven't really locked in on what the best wheelie bar is. I might need you guys' input on that, but I've gone really fast, and I've been in the winner's circle with a flat bar and a single wheel, and I've won with dual wheel shock absorber stuff. That's kind of my latest craze. So we'll go over that tomorrow in the setup stuff. So this is where we're at. This is the front suspension and rear gearbox and rear suspension on the car. That kind of completes the basic kit, and we'll go over setup and electronics tomorrow. So I hope this helps. Give me a message with any questions you guys got, and I think you guys will have the first batch will be to you guys where you can build them this weekend if you have the time. So trying to get these out there before the kits get to you, so you have some instruction on how to build them. So Mike C, I think you had one of the first ones, so Let me know how the build goes, and hopefully I'll see all you guys tomorrow. We'll see you later.